Onto this, Corruption Watch and the Public Affairs Research Institute are calling on the president to create real and lasting procurement reform. The civil society organizations have written to President Cyril Ramaphosa as well as Finance Minister Tito Mboweni saying it's time to act against corruption. We get you more on that letter. We're joined by Dr. Florencia Belvedere from the Public Affairs Research Institute. Good afternoon to you and thank you very much for joining us. So according to the two organizations, it is clear to you that there are significant weaknesses in the existing systems which enable and even facilitate widespread procurement corruption. What are those weaknesses?
Thank you very much. Well, as the Public Affairs Research Institute, we did do a number of submissions on the Public Procurement Bill, and we're concerned that there's still, as much as it's tried to consolidate a number of very disparate pieces of legislation, there's still room for improvement in terms of looking at issues around transparency, issues around appointments to people who need to be part of a number of bid committees, and there's generally a concern that as much as the public has been allowed to make submissions, the public procurement system is not being seen holistically and understood for its intricacies and complexities, which would require debate and real focus and political will by our President and the Minister of Finance to really start addressing those debates with a number of organizations and academics who have the expertise and knowledge to contribute to that debate. I think we owe it to our country to really put in place a piece of legislation that will enable us to address a number of the issues that the President has raised, such as the political administrative interface and sometimes a lot of the opportunities for patronage that are open in the existing bill.
We'll get to your submissions in terms of the draft public procurement bill in a moment, but you do believe that it's a golden opportunity that exists at the moment to introduce change. Is another piece of legislation what we need in this country, given that legislation is continuously flouted?
Well, I think in this particular space, a piece of legislation that consolidates so many disparate other pieces of legislation and regulations actually is welcomed, because what we need is to streamline what is out there, because there are so many pieces of legislation that have a bearing in this area that contributes to the opening for misinterpretation and misapplication of the existing legal framework. Certainly in terms of the issue of enforcement, there are some measures that are being introduced in the new bill, but it's also not clear, for instance, how the tribunal provisions would apply to an area that is so key, as we have seen in recent months, as local government procurement. So indeed, we do need to strengthen the area of enforcement, but what we're saying is that if we look at what's been happening to date, we have been spending a lot of time and money, unfortunately, in having to right the wrong. Yeah, we don't prevent this from happening, but we come afterwards and try to address the wrong. So we've got the SIU, we've got different entities, we've got the Auditor General having strengthened powers in terms of remedial actions. But our point is that we need to be acting proactively before it happens. And therefore the procurement bill presents that particular opportunity, and it's taken quite a while to get here, and this is, as we say, it is such a critical opportunity to make sure that we actually put together a really comprehensive and substantive bill that will address many of the gaps that we are experiencing right now.
Among some of the submissions that you made in the drafting of the bill, you propose incentivizing and supporting whistleblowers as well as the protection, chief amongst which.
That is correct. I mean, this is a practice that has been used in other countries. It's referred to as the Quitam provisions, which would allow citizens to actually be, in a way, rewarded for bringing wrongdoing to the attention of the state. And should the state succeed in securing some of those funds, then those individuals would be able to get a portion of that for having the courage and bravery of coming forward. As we know, currently in South Africa, as much as we have the Protective Disclosures Act, it's often quite difficult for whistleblowers to really do come forward because of the fear of retaliation. So this might be a way of giving back and making sure that those who are strong enough, because a lot of times it takes a lot of courage, particularly in terms of intimidation, that this would be one mechanism, one way of doing that.
Absolutely. Both organizations are committed to working very closely with Treasury in terms of this bill. What sort of response have you gotten thus far?
Well, so far we have received acknowledgements of receipt from both the Office of the Presidency and of the Minister of Finance. And we do hope that indeed, as much as we have been active participants in making submissions, as we say, I think this bill requires a broader debate. Remember that there's, public procurement involves everything from procuring pencils for a State Department to roads and massive infrastructure projects, which require a level of expertise and knowledge that sometimes is very hard to capture through a process of written submissions, and sometimes debates and discussions, and people being in one room and trying to not only learn from the experiences of COVID-19, but more generally from practitioners and people who have been in these fields would go a long way towards producing a bill that can, hopefully not see us in the situation that we are in years to come.
Dr. Florencia Belvedere from the Public Affairs Research Institute, thank you.